that am rudely stamped and want love's majesty to strut before a wanton ambling nymph. I, that I'm curtailed of this fair proportion, cheated of feature by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world scarce half made up, and that so lamely and unfashionable that dogs bark at me as I hop by them.
Hello, my name's Stephen and I'm the Museum Assistant Curator for the DMU Museum. Richard III was the King of England between 1483 and 1485. He was born into the House of York, which is a branch of the Plantagenet dynasty, and there were two main branches, that being the House of York and the House of Lancaster. The War of the Roses was raging at that time. So it was about 3 decades of civil war between the houses of York and the houses of Lancaster. At the time, sort of Henry VI is on the throne, and Richard, Duke of Gloucester, Richard III's father, felt that he had a better claim to the throne than he did. And around a dozen battles happened in those 3 decades, and they culminated or ended with the Battle of Bosworth, when Henry Tudor vanquished or was responsible for the death of Richard III. Leading up to August 26th, 1485, Richard III arrived in Leicester, staying at the Leicester Castle just across the road. But in August 1485, he came and stayed just outside of the Newark and Castle precincts on Highcross Street, at a place called the White Boar Inn, and this was on his way to the Battle of Bosworth. He supposedly stayed there for 1 or 2 nights and then made his way to the Battle of Bosworth and was killed.
My bones, scripted in light upon cold soil, my skull, scarred by a crown, emptied of history, lost long, forever found.
So in the 1980s, a local historian called David Baldwin wrote a paper suggesting that actually Richard was probably still where he was buried after the battle, and that was in the Church of the Greyfriars. So when they found that part of that kind of block of land in the city was now car park, and because there was nothing kind of structural on top of it, it was possible to excavate. So trying to find the location of the Friary Church, which no longer exists, was a key part of their investigations, and they were very lucky in that was actually the first trench that the archaeologists excavated. That was where Richard's skeleton was found. So there are lots of different scientific techniques which we use to identify the remains. The big one that everybody tends to focus on is the use of DNA, partly because the whole concept of DNA fingerprinting to identify an individual was invented here in Leicester by Sir Alec Jeffreys in the 1980s, and it was that technique that was used to help identify the remains as Richard's. So when the archaeological team were uncovering the skeleton in the ground, that was one of the first clues that they might have been onto something, was that, immediately apparent, that spinal deformity, that curve. After further analysis that led the team to discover actually it wasn't a hunchback, it was a condition called scoliosis, which caused the spine to grow in a curve, but that was certainly another clue that this might actually be the skeleton that everyone's been looking for, is, the story of Richard, but also the amazing story of his discovery. It's a huge tourist attraction for Leicester, and it encourages visitors to come to the city to find out more about the city's history. Still a lot of interest in the story, and people are still coming to find out more about it. good.